Coming up on Arirang News. South Korea's prosecution requests an arrest warrant for the leader of the main opposition party, Lee Jae-myung, over allegations of corruption. This is the very first for a sitting opposition leader in the country's constitutional history. Yet, parliamentary approval is required for an actual arrest. Seoul restates Pyongyang and its military as an enemy for the first time in 6 years. This in South Korea's new defense white paper amid the North's escalating nuclear and missile threats. Jikji, the oldest movable metal typeface printed book in the world, is to have its first public appearance in half a century. This April, it'll be on display at an exhibition in France. Hello, it's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin tonight with news of the prosecution seeking an arrest warrant for the leader of the nation's main opposition party. This has never happened before in the country's constitutional history. Yet, Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung denies his alleged wrongdoings and denounces the prosecution's request. Our National Assembly correspondent Han Sung-woo leads our coverage tonight.
South Korea's prosecution has requested an arrest warrant for Democratic Party of Korea chairman Lee Jae-myung on allegations of corruption. It's the first time in the nation's constitutional history that prosecutors have sought an arrest warrant for the sitting leader of a main opposition party. And in response on Thursday, the Democratic Party held a meeting of its Supreme Council where Lee denied any wrongdoing and instead accused the government of abusing state power.
Today will go down as the day the Yoon administration seized the power of the prosecution for itself, the day the rule of law collapsed, blinded by a personal desire to eliminate political enemies.
The ruling People Power Party welcomed the push to arrest the opposition leader, saying Lee brought it upon himself by, it claimed, refusing to answer prosecutors' questions and attempting to destroy evidence.
Once the motion to arrest him reaches Parliament, lawmakers must vote conscientiously in accordance with the National Assembly's legal procedures and its code of ethics.
Lee is mainly accused of having used his former position as mayor of Seongnam City to grant favors to property developers so they could pocket some $610 million in illegal proceeds for the Daejangdong project, at the expense of the city government, which prosecutors say suffered some $380 million in financial damages. He's also suspected of taking bribes from corporations via Seongnam Football Club in the mid-2010s. The Seoul Central District Court will soon ask the prosecution to seek parliamentary consent for Lee's arrest, after which the Justice Ministry, once given presidential approval, will submit the request for consent to the Assembly. The Democratic Party holds 169 out of 299 seats in Parliament, and Lee's arrest requires majority approval. The vote's expected to take place at the Assembly around February 26th. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Seoul's new defense white paper identifies the Kim Jong-un's regime as an enemy for the first time in 6 years, given its military provocations and pursuit of nuclear weapons. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
North Korea is once again defined as South Korea's enemy in the Yoon administration's first defense white paper. As anticipated, the Defense Ministry's 2022 white paper revives the line that was removed under the previous Moon Jae-in government.
We intend for the public to clearly recognize the reality and seriousness of the North Korean threat. In particular, the report states clearly that the North Korean regime and military are our enemies.
The report refers to how the North described the South as a clear enemy in December and how Pyongyang aims for the communization of the entire Korean peninsula. It also points to the North's continued military provocations and incursions into the south, as well as maritime buffer zones, particularly its violations of the 2018 Inter-Korean Agreement on diffusing tensions across the heavily armed border. According to the white paper, Pyongyang has also continued to produce weapons-grade nuclear materials. The paper also added 7 new models to the list of the North's known projectiles. These include close-range and short-range ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, hypersonics, and the massive Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile. In light of these threats, Seoul aims to strengthen its 3-axis system, focusing on preemptive strikes and retaliatory measures that could take out the North Korean leadership.
So it really clears any kind of uncertainty regarding what kind of strategy South Korea has, especially when it comes to North Korea. So it means that the South Korean military is going to have a very proactive, I would say, stance, active posture to deter, I would say, from North Korea from attacking South. And also it means more close coordination with the United States, which is our most important ally.
The paper offers greater detail on implementing Washington's extended deterrence policy that offers security assurance for allies under conventional or nuclear attack. In its bid to strengthen security ties with Washington and Tokyo, Seoul describes Japan as a close neighbour which shares its values, highlighting the need to build futuristic cooperative relations. Still, Seoul says it remains firmly against Japan's revisionist historical and territorial claims. Looking beyond the Korean peninsula, South Korea also sets out to play a greater role in regional security and is reviewing more specific ways to enhance cooperation with Indo-Pacific countries. To address both existing and emerging security threats, the white paper also lays out plans to transform the military with cutting-edge technologies, ranging from artificial intelligence to cyber warfare and space tech. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The United Nations Security Council will hold a closed-door meeting to discuss North Korea and the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. The meeting will be held on Thursday afternoon, New York local time, and according to Voice of America, North Korea's recent military provocations are likely to be discussed. A UN official told VOA in an interview that the meeting was requested by 6 countries, including the United States. The last closed-door meeting on North Korea was held on the 30th of last month at the request of the U.S. A state visit to the U.S. by President Yoon has been an idea that has floated around in diplomatic circles as this year marks the 70th anniversary of the two countries' alliance. There has been speculation about Yoon being invited for a state dinner, but Seoul's top office officials say nothing's been decided. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
According to the U.S. news outlet Bloomberg, South Korean President Yoon could be invited for a state dinner by U.S. President Joe Biden. The news broke early Thursday morning Korea time, and President Yoon's office responded by saying the office understands that the article about President Yoon's state visit to the United States by a certain media outlet is not the official position of the U.S. administration. According to the report, which cites people familiar with the matter, the current plan is to host a dinner in late April, but the timing remains, quote, fluid. The article also said the two countries have, quote, deepened their alliance to tackle ongoing supply chain issues and have strengthened their military ties in response to North Korea's increasingly provocative behavior. If the state dinner were to take place, as is customary on a state visit, it would be only the second one held by President Biden following his hosting of French President Emmanuel Macron last December. It would also be the first time in 12 years for a South Korean president to attend a state dinner at the White House. State visits are the highest among the 4 types of visits to the U.S. by a ranking member of a foreign government. Next is an official visit, which was the form of President Biden's visit to Seoul last May. If the report proves true, then President Yoon is likely to stay at Blair House, which is the official residence for the guests of the White House. He would receive full honors, arrival, and departure ceremonies on the south grounds of the White House with a 21-gun salute. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the South Korea-U.S. alliance, And so it's widely expected that the two countries will continue to scale up their commemorations. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
As millions of people in Syria have been affected by the devastating earthquake, South Korea has decided to provide Syria with $1 million in humanitarian assistance. Announcing the plan on Thursday, Seoul's foreign ministry said it hopes this will help support the victims in Syria and restore the areas hit by the earthquake. It said the fund will be provided through United Nations and noted a request Tuesday from the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for humanitarian aid from the international community to help Syria. An official from the foreign ministry attributed the use of this channel to a lack of diplomatic ties between South Korea and Syria. With help coming in from all over after the last week's devastating earthquakes, diplomatic relations for Türkiye and Syria seem to be improving. According to the foreign ministers of Türkiye and Armenia on Wednesday, both countries said they're willing to fully restore bilateral relations. The border gate between the long feuding countries opened last week for the first time in more than 30 years to allow the entry of aid. Greece also sent help to Türkiye despite the two countries' often difficult relationships over maritime boundaries and Cyprus. Meanwhile, a plane with aid from Saudi Arabia landed in Syria for the first time since 2012, and a top diplomat from Jordan visited Syria despite their severe diplomatic relations. Russia has again targeted Ukraine with cruise and other missiles hitting regions in the north, west, and south. Ukrainian authorities said Russian military on Thursday fired at least 36 missiles in 2 hours, with Ukrainian air defense forces taking down 16 of them. One 79-year-old woman was killed and at least 7 others were injured in the strikes. Some analysts said that the missile launch is part of a new Russian offensive ahead of the war's one-year anniversary later this month. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho has highlighted the importance of broader efforts to diversify export markets and export products to ease Korea's trade deficit. Our ministry correspondent Kim Yeon-seung has more on his remarks.
Ministers in areas related to the economy held an emergency meeting at Seoul government complex on Thursday to address the issues facing the struggling South Korean economy.
Our economy has continued to see falling exports and a trade deficit recently. If we break down the reasons for the trade deficit, most of it comes from energy, semiconductors, and China.
He said trade numbers were dragged down by the high energy costs, a slowdown in demand for semiconductors, and how China's reopening has yet to have a significant impact on the global economy. To address the situation, Chu added that the government will focus on diversifying the market and strengthening other export products so as not to be overly dependent on any one sector. He also urged citizens to join in a collective effort to reduce energy imports by saving energy. Meanwhile, SMEs and Startups Minister Lee Jae-myung unveiled the government's plan for balanced economic prosperity.
The previous plan had 48 key industries in the 14 cities and provinces outside the capital city. We've restructured the business plan by adding 19 new emerging industries and cut down the old ones to 41. So there are a total of 60 industries that the government is keen on fostering.
Regions outside the capital have been facing limited opportunities and a shrinking population. And the aim of this plan is to fulfill President Yoon Suk-yeol's promise to foster a healthy environment for businesses to thrive, which will, in turn, create more job opportunities and improve infrastructure in regions outside of Seoul. Balanced regional development has been an ongoing project for many past governments. This new plan does differ from the past one in some ways.
The plan expands on aerospace technology and has added hydrogen and cybersecurity as new key industries to foster. So it did change a lot from the past 20 years. But what we really need to focus on is changing this into an airtight and realistic plan.
The economic ministries in South Korea are facing a daunting task of boosting the country's economy, which has recently been struggling to gain momentum. 김현승, Arirang News.
Data shows South Korean households have been spending more of their income on food since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Korea Economic Research Institute, a data point called the Angles coefficient, which measures the share of household spending that goes to food, rose from 11.4% in 2019 to 12.8% in 2021. This is an increase of over 1 percentage point, while other major economies such as Japan, France, and the US saw a rise of less than 1 percentage point. The increased spending on food means a rise in the cost of living, which could cause financial strain, especially for low-income families. Soaring heating costs have become a huge problem for people in South Korea over the past few months, with people now referring to heating bills as the bill bomb. Some are now paying double what they were before. Small business owners are feeling the strain too. Lee Jae-myung has the details.
Heating bills have become a bomb. That's what people in South Korea have been saying lately.
My heating bill has more than doubled. I am trying to adapt to life with less heating.
I'm seeing sky-high gas bills now, but we're not able to save money on the bills. We can't even consider raising food prices because then there would be fewer customers.
The average heating cost for apartments last December was 514 won per square meter, or 40 cents, which is almost a 54% increase from a year earlier, according to the Korea Real Estate Board. So the resident of a 30 square meter house is having to pay $31 a month more than a year earlier. What's behind the soaring heating costs? The rise in gas prices. Last year, the government increased gas prices 4 times due to an unstable global energy supply. From last January to October, gas prices jumped 38.4%. Data released by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy shows that the average price of LNG last year was around $34 per million BTU. That's up 128% from the previous year. Adding to this, one expert says rising gas prices were also inevitable to prevent additional deficits for the Korea Gas Corporation.
South Korea imports LNG for the highest price as we heavily rely on Middle Eastern countries. But the country's gas costs for citizens are one of the cheapest in the world, so Korea Gas Corporation saw a deficit of over $7 billion last year and expect to see more.
To cope with the skyrocketing energy costs, the government on Wednesday announced that it has decided to slow down gas rate increases. It also pledged to expand financial aid for low-income households to help pay for their heating with support of up to 590,000 won each, or up to $460. One expert says external factors are too significant to stop gas price increases.
From the war in Ukraine and the US-China trade war, successive shocks have combined to keep uncertainty elevated in the financial market. Foreign currency rates also affect gas prices too, which means high gas prices will remain for a while.
To brace for this, people are also sharing tips on how to save on heating bills. Methods include turning on a humidifier, which can help maintain indoor temperatures as the heat cycles with water vapor. And lowering the temperature instead of setting thermostats to away mode is recommended when you go out. And some experts say home energy efficiency checkups can also help. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in the US, beating earlier market predictions, retail sales rose higher in January amid greater consumer spending on cars, furniture, and fashion. Our Yoon has more on the latest findings.
U.S. retail sales saw the biggest increase in nearly 2 years in January after 2 straight months of decline. The Department of Commerce reported on Wednesday that advanced retail sales for the month increased 3%, higher than the expected 1.9%. American consumers spent more on vehicles, furniture, clothing, and dining out. Motor vehicle and parts dealers saw retail sales increase 5.9%, while sales at service stations remained stable despite a 2.4% increase in gas prices. Home furnishing stores saw a 4.4% rise, online retailers 1.3%, Electronics and appliances stores recorded a 3.5% increase, and food services were up 7.2%. No category saw a decline. The underlying trend in consumption is that Americans are indeed spending. On top of climbing credit card debt, the boost in retail sales in January is being driven by two significant factors. The biggest cost of living adjustment since 1981 went into effect in January, meaning Social Security checks increased 8.7% for more than 65 million recipients. Job growth also surged at the start of the year. According to Labor Department data released earlier this month, the unemployment rate reached a 53-year low as employers added more than 500,000 jobs at the beginning of the year. Experts highlight that though consumption is indeed not as weak as December figures might have indicated, it is not yet as strong as the January numbers suggest. Inflation remains persistent, and the fear of a recession is not completely out of the picture, though not imminent. The Fed will continue to move monetary policy as slated, with quarter percentage point interest rate hikes at each of its next two meetings. 이은진, Arirang News.
Jikji, the oldest movable metal typeface book in the world, will be shown to the public for the first time in 50 years. It'll be on display at an exhibition at the National Library of France in Paris this April. Our Choi Soo-young tells us more.
Jikji, a Korean Buddhist document, is known to be the oldest preserved book in the world that was printed using moving metallic typefaces. And from April 12 to July 16th, it will be on display to the public for the first time in 50 years. The National Library of France in Paris announced on Thursday that Jikji will be part of an exhibition about the invention of printing. It's not the first time that Jikji has been on display at the library. In 1973, it was part of the Treasures from the East exhibition. Before that, it was on display at the Paris Exposition in the year 1900. Jikji was recognized as being the oldest movable metal type book by UNESCO in 2001 and was included in the organization's Memory of World program. In the 1972, Korean librarian and historian Dr. Park Byung-sun discovered that it was 78 years older than the Gutenberg's Bible published in 1455. According to the website Jikji Global, the book was published in 1377 at Heungdeoksa Temple in the city of Cheongju, under its original name, Jikji Simche Yojol, which can be translated to Journey of the Mind in English. The meaning of Jikji is that to understand a person's mind needs to be able to understand Buddha. The Buddhist monk Pagan wrote Jikji in 2 volumes at Seongbulsan Mountain in what is now Chungcheongbuk-do province in 1372, and the temple monks printed it after his death. According to Cheongju Early Printing Museum, towards the end of the Joseon dynasty, the first French ambassador to Korea, Victor Colin de Plancy, acquired the 2nd volume of Jikji for his personal collection. It was sold at the auction to antique collector Henry Vever, and, after he died in 1942, it was donated to the National Library of France in Paris 10 years later. The Overseas Korean Cultural Heritage Foundation said it had discussed a partnership with the library so the two organizations can work together. The foundation helped promote the French translation of Jikji in May last year. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Chilly spells will continue until tomorrow morning, and things will start to get milder thereafter. Temperatures will be unseasonably warm for most regions, including here in Seoul. For southern regions, where the high-pressure system is bringing a surge of warm air, temperatures will surpass 10 degrees for the daytime. For places like Pohang and Busan, daytime highs will be fairly warm at 13 degrees. With the rise in temperatures, do expect wide gaps in daily readings. Most regions will see a gap of at least 10 degrees or more. It's much easier to catch a cold under such fluctuating temperatures, so make sure to dress in layers. And as for the air quality, dust concentrations will soar for the Seoul metropolitan area and the Chungcheongdo provinces. Under partly cloudy skies, Seoul and Gyeongju will be starting off at -2 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to 8 degrees, Daejeon 11, Daegu, Gyeongju, and Busan will all be topping out at 13 degrees. And for this weekend, the entire nation is forecast to see a mix of rain or snowfall. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings us to the end of tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the latest news tomorrow. Good night.